And now we have a short clip on ASEAN-India relations.
Thank you. Chairman of ASEAN, Kuntapana Sirivana Bhakti, Excellencies, Venerable Anil Sakyaji, distinguished speakers and participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, Sawadee-ka. Coming after the very inspirational speech of Venerable Anil Sakyaji, I feel rather inadequate, but let me try to come to the theme of how India has been coping on reopening and recovery and resilience in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. So let me go back to the beginning of this relationship between India and the ASEAN. Jambudvipa, which was one of the names of ancient India, and Swarnabhumi, which is how this part of the world is known in India, have had a long association which goes back millennia. We share the same maritime space. We have geographical contiguity between India's northeast states and Southeast Asia. All our coastal states on the eastern seaboard, as well as some from the western coast, have had seafaring links with this region since antiquity. The ancient ports of Tamralipta in Bengal, Muziris and Nagapattinam in southwest and southeast India, respectively, as well as the eastern seaport of Machilipatnam in the medieval period, hosted trading communities from Southeast Asia, even as similar Indian trading communities settled on the Andaman seacoast or even in the hinterland as during the Ayutthaya period. Thus, the movement of both goods and people also brought about exchanges of thoughts, ideas, philosophy, and religion, which impacted on the lifestyle of our peoples. Stories are replete in many parts of our eastern coast, especially in modern-day Odisha, of the annual voyages from there to Indonesia, which are celebrated till now as the Bali Yatra. Thus, when India and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, became strategic partners in 2012, when we marked the 20th anniversary of our dialogue status, it was a natural culmination of these civilizational links into a substantive, multifaceted contemporary partnership. India's relationship with ASEAN is a key pillar of India's foreign policy and the foundation of our Act East policy. It was in 1992 that then Prime Minister Sri Narasimha Rao launched India's Look East policy, reorienting India towards its eastern neighbors, both in terms of trade as well as political and security linkages. India became a sectoral partner of the ASEAN in 1992, a dialogue partner in 1996, summit-level partner in 2002, and a strategic partner in 2012. There are now more than 30 dialogue mechanisms between India and ASEAN, which cut across various sectors. At the same time, in 2014, India's policy was transformed into the Act East policy. India's engagement has been driven by three goals. Firstly, enhancing connectivity between India and the ASEAN in the broadest sense of the term, that is physical, digital, people-to-people, business. Secondly, strengthening the ASEAN organization. And thirdly, expanding practical cooperation in the maritime domain. In practical terms, this is carried out in a structured manner under the 5-year plan of action. the current plan of action for the period 2021 to 2025 for peace, progress, and shared prosperity, of which 85% is already being implemented, covers 4 broad areas. Firstly, political and security cooperation. Secondly, economic cooperation. Thirdly, socio-cultural cooperation and cross-pillar cooperation. To support these activities, India has created 3 funds: the ASEAN-India Cooperation Fund, the ASEAN-India Green Fund, and ASEAN-India Science and Technology Development Fund. Coming to the COVID-19 pandemic, the pandemic, as has been mentioned by the previous speakers, has had a devastating effect on all countries, resulting in loss of lives as well as livelihoods. In this region alone, several millions have been reduced to poverty. While these are, of course, the material effects, as has been mentioned by Venerable Anil Sakya ji, what is often unseen are the long-term psychological and mental consequences of the pandemic. Among large economies, I'm happy to say that India, through their several proactive steps which were taken, is now firmly on a recovery path. The massive vaccination drive based on indigenously produced vaccines, the economic stimulus package of around $280 billion that not only included critical fiscal and monetary support for the economy, but also provision of cash transfers to vulnerable sections of society, as well as free food grains to 800 million people, which continues till now, as well as key structural reforms have played a huge part in the recovery. The challenging times of the pandemic were utilized, in fact, by the government of India to initiate some of the biggest projects to modernize India's digital and physical infrastructure. The foreign direct investment regime was liberalized, and the production-linked incentive schemes were launched worth more than $26 billion across 14 crucial sectors. Exports were ramped up, and in fact, in 2021, we were able to achieve a record $400 billion worth of exports, which is far larger than earlier years. For us, the Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign, or the Self-Reliant India program, was not to become a fortress India, but to give a fillip to domestic manufacturing and thus become a reliable partner in the global supply and the value chains. Thus, after the pandemic, our trade and investment engagement with the world has actually increased. India's GDP is expected to grow at around 8%. Through our Vaccine Maitri, or the Vaccine Diplomacy Initiative, we supplied Made in India vaccines, more than 200 million doses, in fact, to almost 100 countries, and essential medicines to around 150 countries in the world. India has, in fact, fully vaccinated 90% of its adult population with about 1.9 billion doses being administered. And what has been shown is that it has been able to very effectively use low-cost COVID-19 mitigation strategies to both detect and treat the pandemic. So our approach, both internally and externally, has reflected the old Indian concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means that the world is one family. Since March 2022, in fact, we are fully open to the world. And this is, of course, was not reflected in the charts of one of the previous speakers, which said that India was partially open. I would like to assure all of you that India is now fully open. And we are, I think, #1 in terms of tourist arrivals in Phuket, to be very specific, to Thailand. The Indian experience underlines the importance of 4 aspects in a country's COVID-19 recovery and resilience: a successful vaccination rollout, a whole of not only government, but a whole of society approach, economic stimulus and recovery package, including reforms, and willingness to play a proactive and responsible role in the global fight against the pandemic. While the pandemic has posed unprecedented challenges, it has opened new vistas for ASEAN-India cooperation. ASEAN and India have mutually assisted each other during the pandemic by providing essential medicines, vaccines, and other COVID-related assistance. For example, during India's second wave, we sourced oxygen-related equipment from Singapore and from Thailand. And when countries in the region, including Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand, were experiencing a surge in cases, we supplied both oxygen as well as oxygen-related equipment. Going forward, we intend to share medical technologies, exchange traditional medical knowledge, collaborate in vaccine and pharmaceutical production and distribution, as well as cooperate for capacity building and transparency in health information. India's Act East policy has focused on ensuring security, growth, and prosperity in the region by promoting greater productive connectivity with the ASEAN region. By connectivity, we mean not only physical, but also economic, political connectivity, and close contacts at the people-to-people level. The India-Myanmar-Thailand trilateral highway is an ongoing effort to enhance road connectivity between India's northeast and ASEAN. While there's good air connectivity between India and a few ASEAN countries such as Thailand, Singapore, and Malaysia, we are making efforts to improve air connectivity with other countries in the region as well. On the economic front, India-ASEAN trade and investment relations have been growing. Our trade with ASEAN is close to $100 billion in 2022, but it is yet to reach its full potential. India and ASEAN are, in fact, in the process of reviewing the ASEAN-India trade and goods agreement. Development cooperation is, of course, another mainstay of ASEAN-India relations. We have launched a number of programs and projects for capacity development in ASEAN, and we have another important sub-regional cooperation mechanism in the form of Mekong-Ganga cooperation. In fact, India is the oldest partner to the lower Mekong region countries, and that mechanism is over 20 years old now. And that is also dedicated to furthering this aspect and contributing to the initiative for ASEAN integration by implementing various community-related short gestation projects. The COVID-19 pandemic period has underlined the importance of digital connectivity and the need for robustness in cyber technologies. With large young populations, both in India and ASEAN, there's immense potential to enhance online economic, educational, and cultural exchanges between the two sides. In turn, given the rapidly increasing threats to safe and secure cyberspace, in the COVID and post-COVID era, ASEAN-India cyber cooperation is assuming great importance. As part of our people-to-people exchanges, there has been great interaction among the youth. The ASEAN-India Hackathon held virtually in February 2021, and 1,000 integrated PhD fellowships for ASEAN students offered by India at our prestigious Indian Institutes of Technology are aimed at this. India also provides more than 1,000 scholarships to ASEAN students, both bilaterally and under the ASEAN-India track, every year at various universities and institutions. The Delhi Dialogue mechanism, which is hosted by India's External Affairs Minister annually, serves as the main 1.5 track mechanism, which allows participation of think tanks, academics, and prominent civil society persons from both sides. The next edition, in fact, will be taking place in June 2022. Further, there is also an ASEAN-India Center, which has been set up as part of the Research and Information System for Developing Countries in New Delhi. ASEAN is not only central to India's Act East policy, but also to its vision for the wider Indo-Pacific region. A strong, united, prosperous ASEAN contributes to security and growth for all in the region. India and ASEAN have converging visions for the Indo-Pacific. India was one of the first countries to welcome the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, the AOIP. The synergy between AOIP and the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative the IPOI, which was launched by India's Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi during his participation in the East Asia Summit, which was held in Bangkok in November 2019, provides us a great opportunity to advance ASEAN-India strategic partnership in the Indo-Pacific region, particularly in the areas of maritime cooperation, connectivity, and achieving sustainable development goals. We look forward to Thailand joining with India to work on one of the pillars of the IPOI. So in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, the question is how can we collaborate to ensure both recovery and resilience? In fact, only yesterday at the 7th edition of the ASEAN-India network of think tanks, the Minister of State for External Affairs, Dr. Rajkumar Ranjan Singh, recalled that the world is now facing headwinds both from the global economic as well as security scenarios. He suggested 3 areas of cooperation between India and ASEAN: health security, digital economy, and green and sustainable development. So on a pan-ASEAN level, India has been contributing $1 million towards the COVID-19 ASEAN Response Fund. We have also contributed $200,000 US dollars worth of medical aid as humanitarian assistance to Myanmar through ASEAN. Under the Quad Vaccine Partnership, India has contributed more than 500,000 Made in India vaccines, which were last month, in fact, given to Cambodia and thereafter to Thailand. So these are, of course, very immediate actions. In terms of meaningful health partnerships, which are long-term, Minister Rajkumar Ranjan Singh also spoke of the need to share medical technologies and traditional medical knowledge. With Thailand, we have, in fact, an MOU which we are currently negotiating on medical research and development. We are also working on cooperation in the area of traditional medicine to enhance immunity and the promotion of yoga and meditation to deal with the psychological effects of COVID-19. More quick impact projects, particularly in the CLMV countries in the digital area, centers of excellence in IT, English language centers, cybersecurity training, and telemedicine projects, connecting remote areas to urban centers, and fintech are some areas that we can work on. We have to ensure a greener economic recovery. India has an ambitious vision for renewables and for green hydrogen. Thailand itself has its biocircular green economy model. We can work together in developing smart technologies that are useful for agriculture, for construction, and transportation. We have to conserve our biodiversity and combat illicit trafficking of endangered species of flora and fauna. Above all, we have to adopt responsible lifestyles to preserve our planet. I can only recall the words of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the Indian nation, who said that there is enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. I now close by recalling that this year marks 30 years of ASEAN-India relations, and this has been designated as the ASEAN-India Friendship Year. So let us work together to contribute in the creation of a prosperous and resilient community in both India and the ASEAN, and of course, together contribute towards the resilience and recovery of the entire world. Thank you very much. Khop Kun Kha.